Your eyes snap open to a darkness that has teeth. Not the safe, velvety dark of your bedroom screen on the nightstand. Heat purring through vents, fridge humming downstairs. This is a dark that presses. You taste it when you breathe. It has a flavor, ash, old wood, a hint of iron from the nailed planks above. Somewhere close, something creaks the way a ship creaks when it thinks about sinking. You're 13. That's what your bones tell you when you try to move old bones in a young body. Stiff from a straw mattress that kept the shape of you through the night and then froze that way. Your name is William, and your first thought is not a thought at all. It's a reflex. Fire. Your second is hunger. The straw sacks rasp under your weight as you angle up on your elbows. The movement releases a papery snowfall of chaff. Your breath fogs so thick it looks like cotton batting. Through the gaps between hand-hewn logs, moonlight slices the room into cold silver stripes. Somebody promised to chink those seams tomorrow. Tomorrow has been a liar for months, William. A whisper from across the room, thin as split wood. Martha, 14, your sister. Brave and beautiful in the brittle way of winter things that haven't broken yet. I can't feel my toes, she says. You listen. The air answers with small sounds. The tiny hiss of your breath, the rough cough from the pallet by the hearth, the soft, stubborn stirring of the coals. Nobody saved like they meant it. Your father. 2 days of a cough that sits low and wet. A cough that shakes nails in boards. Wiggle them. You want to say, but your mouth is busy not chattering. You swallow the words, then try again. Wiggle them. The advice of every winter morning. As unhelpful and necessary as it ever was. In the corner, Samuel. A curled karma beneath a tattered blanket, 8 years old. Holding sleep like it's something that could be stolen. Outside, wind running its slow hand along the grain of the cabin. You stand now, you try. Your feet hit the floorboards and you gasp. There is frost on the inside of the planks. You could skate on this if you had skates, if you had time, if the world were a joke. Fire, says the back of your skull. Fire before speech. Fire before water. Fire before fear. You kneel at the hearth and the cold rides your spine like a rider that knows its horse. Your fingers are clumsy, white strangers grafted onto your wrists. You find the tinderbox by touch. Char, cloth, flint, steel. You remember the ritual, the way you remember your name. Spark, catch, breathe, build. The first strike is nothing. The second makes a sound like a tooth breaking. On the 6th, a star falls onto the black cloth and decides to live. You close it in your hands, the way your mother showed you. Shelter the ember like a secret. You feed it dry grass. You whisper to it with the shortest, gentlest breath you own. It glows, sulks. Then flurs, shy animal that chooses to trust. Kindling, sticks. A pine split from last fall that still remembers resin. The flame grows teeth of its own. It licks a twig, takes a bite, asks for more. When the first lick of warmth kisses your cheeks, your eyes sting hard and hot. You will not cry at a fire. You might pray to it, though, a little. You might thank it the way a drowning boy thanks a hand that grabs his collar. Good, your mother's voice. Behind you, a shape risen from blankets and duty. 34 with winter's math that adds 20 years to any face. She lays a bigger split onto the baby fire with the quiet certainty of someone who has done this on mornings when nobody else woke up. Water, she says. One word, every morning, a commandment. You take the bucket. The handle burns your palm with the cold. The door is a board pretending to be a door. You unlatch it, shoulder through, and the day slaps you. Your tears freeze before they know they were tears. The world is glass, sky the color of old steel, snow-crusted where yesterday's sun softened and last night's wind decided that kindness was a mistake. The well post is a gallows silhouette against the pale, 50 paces, bare feet on crusted snow. Not today. Today she sends you with shoes. They don't so much keep out the cold as introduce it more politely. At the well, the rope is a stick. You bend it with both hands and something in your fingers staggers. The bucket drops into dark. No splash, just a thud so dull it is almost a sound you feel in your teeth. Ice. You pull lower. Pull again until the rope shivers and the bucket coughs up slush and shards the size of a child's fist. You bring it back like treasure. It is treasure inside. The room has taken the first step from death toward life. Heat is the slowest courier. It brings nothing you didn't pay for. Your father watches you through a slit of eyelid, counts your steps as if they were his own. Your mother hangs the pot. Cornmeal if the ledger allows. Water always. She doesn't look at her portion. You don't ask. No one wastes a lie this early in the day. You feed the flame. It eats wood like it's been starving all night, because it has. Everything is starving here. The cabin for light. The wind for a way in. Your mother's hands for softness. You for a future that is not measured in splits of ash and minutes without coughing. When the first bubbles flirt with the surface of the pot, Samuel rises, blinking, a small boy in an army of cold. He says nothing, because hunger is a language and it has verbs you can hear. William. Your father rasps, then stops to swallow a rattle. Wood. Not a question. The pile near the door is a rumor. The pile outside is a promise with strings attached. Axe edge, breath, sweat that turns to needles on the back of your neck. You nod. You always nod. After, your mother says. After you feed the girls. The cows. 2 rib-spelled maps in brown hides. Betty and May. The field is a white page. You write a path through it with your legs. They stand like badly parked weather. Betty takes hay like a prayer answered. May looks at nothing. You put the hay under her nose and wait until the ghost in her eyes flickers. Eat, sweetheart, you say to a cow. And the world does not giggle because the world doesn't do that in January. On the way back, the wind tries to autograph your cheeks. The cabin smokes a grey ribbon into a sky that has decided color is decadent. You open the door, and for a second, in the way a smell can be a hand, you feel home. Ash, wool, boiled corn, damp wood. You set the bucket by the hearth. You pass a bowl to Samuel, then to Martha, then to yourself. You pretend not to see your mother watching the pot after she says she isn't hungry. What's the plan? You ask not because asking births a plan, but because hearing your mother say one makes your legs less likely to shake. Fire, water, wood, cattle, coals, banked before dark, she says, like reciting tide tables. If the wind eases, we mend. If it doesn't, we huddle. Outside, the day begins to bleed its thin light into the trees. Inside, the fire remembers how to be a son. You fetch the axe from its peg, run your thumb along the edge, the way a boy checks if a knife is still honest. Your father used to say, "A dull blade asks for blood." You don't have any to spare. Be careful, Martha says. It's not fear. It's a wish disguised as a warning. You pulled the door wide, and winter grins. You grin back, a little flatter, a little meaner than you used to. Because on mornings like this, you learn the most important thing winter teaches. Whether you're ready or not doesn't matter. You go anyway, and every breath you take is something you took back from a season that would rather you didn't. Asterisk, the axe tells the truth when it lands. You raise, you breathe, you split. The sound is a syllable. The wood answers, gives you 2 for 1, like generosity is still legal. Your arms warm quickly. Your fingers, never. Sweat beads along your spine and turns into cold coins. The wind negotiates with the lean-to roof and wins, sneaking a sharp fingertip down your collar when you've stacked enough to see the pile and feel the ache. You find him, a man making his way across the white, a dark note moving through a pale song. He carries the kind of coat that keeps promises. The kind neighbors in German country make from wool that remembers the sheep. Hinrich Müller, half a mile east. A man built like a beam and as generous as the beam is strong. He taught you last fall which trees split cooperative and which ones sulk even when dead. Boy, he says, his vowels braided with a German rope. Your papa, bad, you admit, because Hinrich asks only to measure what help costs. He nods like he already knew and just wanted you to say it to loosen the fear. We fix for cow, he says. No barn, then make a not barn. The word leans wrong in his mouth and still makes more sense than most things. Lean to. 3 walls. Roof like hat. He points the universal language of building. You do not know how to say, we have nails for 1 wall, boards for half, and time only if we steal it from something else that will punish us later. You say, thank you. It isn't enough, but he hears the other words folded inside. Tomorrow, he says, bring brother. You bring hands. I bring wood. He claps a shoulder. Warmth travels through wool like a rumor. Tell your mother Greta has herbs. Tea for lungs. Is bitter, so make a face before you sip so you don't waste your only good one. He grins. You grin back. Jokes in winter are hot stones in your pockets. They don't feed you, but you hold them anyway. Asterisk. Back inside, the air has fattened. The fire is old enough now for logs that don't need mentoring. Your mother's cheeks are the color of weathered apples. You tell her about Hinrich, and the lines at the corners of her mouth soften. Tomorrow, she repeats, as if the word finally means what it says. Today, you add gently, we still need water. She nods. You shoulder the bucket. Outside, the light pretends at warmth and fails but earns partial credit for effort. The well mouth stares up like an unblinking eye. You lower the bucket, and this time amidst a sound you've missed the delicate slap of liquid that isn't pretending to be stone. You grin, you pull. When the bucket breaks the lip, it throws a cold mist in your face. You welcome it. Fresh hurts are better than old ones. At the door, boots slide on packed ice. You catch yourself on the jam, fling the sloshing water forward instead of backward, and laugh, breathless. The kind of laugh that admits how quickly joy can be a bruise. Careful, your mother says, without looking. She's mending with a speed that has no waste in its thread chosen because it is thread, not because it matches. Martha is sweeping a floor that will be muddy by afternoon and frosted again by morning. Samuel's cornhusk doll is now a soldier, now a horse, now a neighbor he likes better than you. You love him for it. Breakfast is a word you use to describe heat in a bowl. You swallow, slow. Your mother doesn't swallow at all. You can sting your sister with an elbow over that, or you can be who your father wanted when he taught you how to bank a fire. You give your portion to your mother and you make a joke about how you can't taste much anyway and maybe the wind ate your tongue. She says nothing for a heartbeat that is long enough to be a year, then she eats. Sometimes love sounds like chewing. Wood, your father rasps again, not because he forgot he already said it, but because he needs to believe the world still listens when he talks. You say, because your voice is part of what keeps him here. You go to the wood line for fallen branches. Dead wood is generosity you don't have to repay. As you step, the crust breaks, and each shindy plunge is a sentence you don't want to finish. Under the trees, the air holds still. The forest is a cathedral with a frozen choir. Your breath is incense. You pick through the ferns of snow, test branches, hear the clean snap of wood that's ready to burn. A raven knits the sky with its call. Everything else is busy, not spending calories on sound, on the road. A horse appears with a rider who has decided to keep riding even though the road is a plan the weather no longer respects. They skate, panic, relearn balance, repeat. You watch long enough to memorize the lesson. Winter turns every choice into a bet. Good men still wager. By midday you've brought in enough wood to be briefly optimistic and permanently tired. Inside, the room has learned the geometry of comfort people near flame. The sick propped just so, the children where their heat helps without being asked. Your father's cough peels a fresh strip off your nerves. When he breathes again without the pink froth you feared. You release a piece of air you didn't remember you were holding mother's. Your mother says, as if the name itself is a draft stopper, "Greet us tea." You nod. She sets out a cup like an altar. You pull the door and the day hits the house like a shoulder. The wind has picked up its argument. The second trip to the well bites harder. The third, the rope burns your palm even through the glove and you don't mind because it's a pain you chose. On the fourth, the surface has set sugar high. You fetch the hand axe, tie it to a rope, and you and your mother become a two-person machine. Lower, lift, smash, lift. When the ice sighs and gives, you cheer. Nobody else hears it, but the sound is a kind of heat. Afternoon is a narrow band of mercy. You waste none of it. The cows eat slower now, which is the only speed that matters, unhurried. May's eyes look less like windows in an empty house. You think you see the smallest change in the way she stands as if a roof she can't see is already over her. You bring the last armload, and something in your shoulder clicks like a misfired flint. You roll it until it remembers you're not done with it. Your mother salts the porridge with an onion the size of a thumb, and it tastes like a holiday. Samuel licks the inside of his bowl with a thoroughness you respect. Then the cough comes back, heavy and deep, and your father leans and fails to find air, and you think, for a slice of a second, about how winter loves the stillness after a sound. Your mother stands, moves behind him, and pounds his back like she's arguing with the season. He gasps, retches once into the bucket, then breathes like a man found a door. There is blood, not much, enough to tint the rules. Tea, your mother says. The word is a rope. You fetch water that wants to be ice again and watch the yarrow steep its sharpness into a cup the color of a promise. Your father drinks. He doesn't make a face. He knows he's used his one good one for the day. Tomorrow, you tell him, because it's the only generosity you can afford. Hinrich's bringing boards. He closes his eyes and nods, and you can tell he is in a room in his head where he builds a barn with 2 hands that don't shake. Then turns around and doesn't cough at all. Dusk is a slow drowning. You bank the fire the careful way, coals gathered, ash folded. You've learned what enough means here. Enough to last till dawn if the wind isn't feeling greedy. Enough to wake you with smoke in your throat if it is. Everyone climbs onto mattresses that sound like kindling when you move. You keep your boots near. You sleep in everything. The wind finds a new song. It plays the gaps like a flute. You pull the blanket high and make your body into a smaller country. For a while, you listen to your father breathing. For a while, you don't. When sleep finally comes, it brings a dream where the river is glass and you run across it and hear it sing. In the morning, the fire has slumped to red eyes and you know exactly how much speed you have to get from cold to alive. You move before your name returns to you. What you don't know, not yet, is that by sunset tomorrow there will be a small roof out in the field. 3 shivering walls, and 2 cows inside deciding to keep going. You don't know that you'll stand there with Hinrik and feel your lungs burn and understand the arithmetic of neighbors. I survive because you helped me. You survive because I help you back. Both of us survive because no one stood around meaning well. For now, there is the ember, and your breath, and the patience of small flames. And that is enough to steal the morning back. Asterisk. Dawn begins not with light, but with sound. Your father retching into the bucket. Your mother's voice in a tone that means stand back. The scrape of a spoon against clay as she stirs that tea like she can make it stronger by scolding it. The fire is lukewarm and guilty. You redeem it in 3 strikes. The ember takes, sulks, and blooms. The day agrees to begin. We're going, your mother says, tying shawl to chin, fingers red and split. Samuel stays. He watches the flame and your father's breath. Samuel puffs his chest like a rooster that hasn't met a real rooster. Martha bundles in layers with names petticoat, shift, gown names that don't add warmth but give it ceremony. You step into a world that has spent the night sharpening itself. Snow holds sun like crushed glass. Trees are calligraphy in ink the sky can't afford. At the Muller place, warmth is an animal that lives in the kitchen and roams the house. Greta opens the door and it escapes into the hall and pounces on your face. She puts a bowl in your hands before you can say good morning. It is thick. It is hot. It has meat. You make the face your father saved. Eat, she orders. Then carry. Hinrik appears with tools like a magician in a story where the trick is work. Saw's hammer, nails saved like coins. Planks cut last fall that have a faint summer inside them. You shoulder what you can carry and 1 more. Martha takes stakes and a look that says, don't estimate me in front of these people. Estimate me correctly. The first trip is a play whose script is breath. By the 3rd, your forearms sing hymns you didn't know you'd learned. In your field, Betty and May are 2 punctuation marks in brown. A comma chewing, a period waiting. Hinrik paces an 8x8 square with a farmer's math. He points east. Mouth this way, he says. Wind, she likes west. You learn with your hands how to bite through frozen dirt with an axe. How to persuade a post to stand plumb. How to treat a nail like a fragile. Expensive idea. Samuel, who absolutely did not stay home, peers with a grin and a length of rope. Your mother comes too, just to see, and ends up keeping the fire in the house beating and the tea near and the broth warm. because winter is a boss with no payroll. And you get paid in calories and reasons to keep breathing. The shelter rises at a speed you can feel in your back. The walls are not pretty, and that's not the assignment. The roof goes on slanted like a shoulder that knows which way rain chooses. A gust tests your work shoves, sniffs, considers breaking you for sport and decides, grudgingly, you'll do for now. Hey, Hinrik says. And you ferry the last of what you saved from summer and maybe 2 handfuls you were pretending you didn't have. The floor becomes golden. The small space smells like July. Then the part every builder forgets, getting the tenants to sign the lease. Betty steps in like she invented the idea. May looks at the entrance like an insult. You don't tug. You don't push. You offer a fist of hay, a voice that belongs to children and saints. Come on, girl. Come on. She leans. She considers. She licks your mitten because hay plus salt is a flavor. She takes 1 step. The roof holds. She takes 2. The wind loses interest. She eats like forgiveness. You can feel your mother exhale from the doorway of the cabin. Hinrik taps a plank. More here, he says, and you give the wall a rib. You pack snow around the base like mortar. The structure learns how to be a shelter. Samuel, solemn, pats the boards like blessing a ship. Don't fall, he says, a prayer boiled down to its bones. Greta has been busy the way good news is busy. When you return the tools, she presses a wrapped bundle into your mother's hands. Bread that makes your nose close to tears. Cheese that actually bends when you bite it. Sausage that winks at your stomach like an old friend. And herbs yarrow to steep until the kitchen smells clean. Mustard for a plaster that will love your father's skin in the punishing way medicine loves. When you drink, Greta says, make the face first. You all laugh, the kind of laugh that fills the cracks inside a person. Back home, the cabin expands to fit joy. Your father sits up with help, he pretends he doesn't need, and you open the door wide so he can see the knot barn that is. In this new math, a miracle. He smiles with the half of his face that isn't tired, and it's enough to make you taller. Dinner tastes like victory and salt and gratitude you don't know how to say out loud. After your mother brews the tea, the steam is thin but confident. Your father drinks. He saves his face for later, as instructed. Night lands softly, as if the day was a job interview and it didn't want to ruin its chances. Wind tries the seams and finds fewer worth playing. The coals go under ash with the kind of care that is love with dirty hands. You lie down and, for the first time in weeks, your stomach tells a story that isn't about loss. You sleep like a person, not like a battlefield. Morning wakes with hope pre-installed. You are up before it can reconsider. When you open the door, the sky has the color of an idea that might work. The shelter is still standing. Betty blinks at you from inside, like, obviously. May looks like a cow that made a decision and is pleased with herself. You toss fresh hay. They answer by living. You turn back toward the house and see something that stops. You cold then warms you in the same heartbeat. Footprints crossing the road down toward the river. Small, careless. Yesterday's confidence in today's ice. Shouting, thin and sharp, rides the air. You run. A boy stands on the river 20, maybe 30 feet from shore. The ice beneath him is a stained glass window of cracks. He is doing the smartest thing he can do, not moving. He is also doing the worst thing he can do, standing on a river in March. His mother screams his name until the sound runs out of letters. Hinrik arrives, the way good. Men arrive, rope already in his hands, knots already in his head. Hold me, he tells two men who were waiting for a command that felt like their own idea. He edges out onto the ice, weight distributed the way an apology is. Come, he tells the boy. I am here. You learn something about courage in the next 10 seconds that no sermon could have taught you in 10 years. Courage is not the absence of a tremor in the voice. You hear it in Hinrich's. Courage is the step he takes anyway. The ice complains in whale song you feel in your ribs. Hinrich reaches. The boy reaches. A handspan of air between. One step, Hinrich says. Then I have you. The boy moves a miracle the size of a shoe. Their fingers lock. The men on shore pull as if gravity got promoted. The ice fractures under Hinrich's trailing foot and swallows his leg to the knee. He roars, a sound you have never heard from a human throat. The rope holds. The men hold. People hold. They reach shore. The boy's mother becomes a weather system made of relief. Hinrich is marched toward fire by people who will not let him argue. He doesn't. He lets the heat eat the cold, and you stand there, pulse like a drum, and think, this is how we live here, bad bets. Good ropes, hands that make new rules. By afternoon, the boy's mother brings a pie that knows too much sugar for this season. She leaves it without staying because gratitude this large embarrasses the throat. Evening falls. You spar with the fire. It lets you win. Your father drinks his second cup of yarrow without bargaining. He coughs less. He says the word April, and it sounds like he believes in months again. Martha's needle goes in and out, and she hums a tune she remembers from somewhere warm. You step outside one last time before sleep, just to check on the girls. The sky is hard clear. Stars bite. Your shelter crouches like a friend keeping watch. For a second, you remember a house with glass windows and a bed with feathers, and you think of England like a story that used to be true. Then May sighs the deep sigh of an animal that plans to wake up. And you think, this is home because we decided it is. And because today, we earned tomorrow. Asterisk morning comes wearing a thin veil of kindness and a thick smell of yarrow. Your father's chest sounds less like a flooded cellar, more like an old wagon that might make it to town if you pack it right. That counts. Today, the plan is not survival in the abstract. It's math, for tallow candles for wool, maybe for buttermilk if the Fletchers are feeling flush. Stay with your father. Your mother tells Samuel, which he hears as look noble by the fire. He puffs up. Martha knots her scarf so tight it looks like it's holding her head on. You hand her the candle bundle, precious as coins in a world that prefers barter. The path north is a paragraph you've already read, but this time the words are less sharp. Trees hold snow like careful waiters. Every few minutes, a branch fails politely. The air has a new smeller wet iron note that says thaw, soon the way a rumor says somebody's pregnant. You don't believe it yet. You believe what your nose tells you. Wood smoke, wool, the faint sour of work coats that never really dry. The Fletcher cabin is bigger than yours because it holds more chaos. When Mrs. Fletcher opens the door, children spill like marbles. She catches one under each arm and smiles with her eyes crinkling. And for the first time you notice laugh lines can live beside worry lines without fighting. Come in, she barks warmly, which is an art. The air in their one big room is thick with heat and noise. A baby tuning up to complain. A boy stomping a wall with boots he's not supposed to wear inside. A A girl humming while she braids another girl's hair with fingers too cold to feel clever. Your mother places the candles on the table like putting down dignity. Mrs. Fletcher lifts one, sniffs it, nods approvingly. You poured even, she says. No tunnels. Compliments about craftland like food. 2 skeins, she offers. Carded, grey. She watches your mother's face, then adds, and a cup of buttermilk. For the children? Not because I like you. It's a joke that could be a test, but your mother laughs, honest. I don't like me much either, she says, and they both grin like women who have been hungry together. The skeins are pear wool that looks like storm clouds you'd invite in, and then the buttermilk in a wooden cup that remembers dairy hands. You split it with Martha, 3 careful sips each. It coats your throat, tastes like indulgence and cow breath, and you would write sonnets about it if you could spell sonnets. How's Ken? Your mother asks. Cough with fever. Mrs. Fletcher grimaces. Men, she says. When they cough, the roof falls in. When we cough, we sweep around it. Your mother nods, like amen. There's news, of course. There is always news, because nothing else moves in winter but words. The Hendersons lost their barn to a chimney spark that pretended to be a star and then became a mouth. Mr. Peterson shared half his woodpile, even though he looks like he'd trade a prayer before he'd trade a log. The Dawson sum of them are talking about Philadelphia in the spring. Grief loves a fresh town. A boy about Samuel's age tugs your sleeve. "Want to see something?" he asks. He leads you to a box with the solemnity of a priest. Inside, a mouse, stiff with a note of glossy. "It's sleeping," he declares. "Till spring." You start to say it's dead, and then you stop. Maybe both things are true in a world where ponds sleep and then wake up. Martha and one of the Fletcher. Girls compare holes like medals. "That's a good patch," the girl says, pointing to your sister's careful stitches. "My ma would hire you if she had money." Martha blushes the color of February blood and pretends she didn't hear. Your mother and Mrs. Fletcher finish their trade with a handshake that feels like a treaty. At the door, Mrs. Fletcher shoves a small loaf into your mother's bag and says, "Don't tell Ken." Your mother tries to refuse and loses gracefully. "We're all barely making it," Mrs. Fletcher says. "Might as well barely make it together." On the walk home, you carry the wool and the bread and the buttermilk memory like a stack of small miracles. The road gives way in places to streams of melt that run under crust and whisper about April. You watch your breath in the softer air and think about measures about how an honest cup is more than food. It's a way of saying we are not animals yet. When you push the door open, warmth bows. Samuel is there with his cornhusk soldier, chin up, cheeks flushed from tending a flame like it was a pet. Your father's eyes are brighter. You can tell because the room has more he said in it. You spread the goods on the table. Your mother holds the wool like a future. She flicks your sleeve. "Tonight," she says, "your knees won't see the wind anymore." She says it like a love letter. You eat the bread slow. Each bite is an argument against despair. Your father takes his tea without bargaining and wheezes less for it. The afternoon is even warm enough that your mother opens the door for a full minute to sweep without freezing the floor into a pond later. You and Martha mend by a window that is just oiled paper with aspirations. She teaches you a stitch that lies flatter. Then the wind slides off, she says. You listen like a pilgrim. When your fingers cramp, you stop and stand and go outside to look at the lintu. May and Betty shift and chew, alive like a pair of stubborn sentences. Evening does its long, gold thing. Your mother divides the last of the onions in a way that makes them be more onion than they are. There is laughter in the house that isn't forced to pass for heat. You watch the flames, and for the first time in a long stretch of days, you let your mind walk somewhere else, toward time that isn't measured in firewood. The lesson sits there on the hearth like a fifth family member. Sometimes the difference between a brutal day and a bearable one is a trade. A cup, a neighbor who weighs the measure honestly and decides to be generous anyway. The world stays cold. Your insides, done before bed, your father says, Saturday's gathering. We go. He sounds like a man who plans to sit up in the wagon you don't own. Your mother looks at him and calculates how much of that plan is bluff. She lets him have it. Hope needs practice too. You bank the fire while Martha banks the smiles. The house feels less porous, like a ship that earned a new plank. Sleep comes, and this time it's not a battle. It's a bargain you keep. Tomorrow we'll ask for more. Tonight, you've got interest back on light. Asterisk, the winter sky practices blue for the first time in a month. Not warm, not even optimistic, just blue, like a statement of fact. You tie a scarf around your father the way you'd tie a load to a sled and help him onto Bess. He pretends he needs only a hand. He needs two and a shoulder. He takes them without pride-struck fuss because he's learned new arithmetic. Help received counts as strength. Not lack that the settlement's crossroads is for rutted lanes, arguing with each other under snow. Someone framed 3 walls and a roof last autumn. They called it the hall, and the name stuck better than the nails. Today it hosts 20 families and the quiet electricity of open palms. Goods look thin in winter, even when they're not. 1 blanket with less blanket left in it. 10 logs dressed like royalty. A chicken that clucks like it's negotiating. A small jar of honey held the way saints hold relics. Dried beans that tick like hail when you shake them. A pair of shoes you try not to imagine the story of. Your mother sets 2 candles on a cloth and watches the congregation gather. It's not greed. It's velocity. No one moves fast except hunger. How much? An old man asks. Your mother smiles without numbers. What do you have? He opens a pouch and pours cornmeal into her palm from the height that makes it look like more. She weighs it by feel and by the memory of her children's faces. She nods. He nods. They trade gratitude without words, and both go home less poor. The second candle buys peas nearly a cup, honest. You want to shake the woman's hand again just for remembering scales were invented. She adds a pinch of salt with the privacy of someone who is smuggling joy. Kids find each other the way drops of water find it downhill. You are an older kid today, because you set your body near your father so he doesn't have to spend the muscles on staying vertical. But you watch. You remember. A circle of stones appears in the snow, and suddenly the world's oldest game is new in mittened hands. A girl drops a stone and howls with laughter like she meant to. The sound flares in the cold. People look up and dare to smile. Not all the news is trade. Some of it is listed in the ledger nobody writes in. James Dawson, someone says, and then stops because the name is the whole entry. Silence does the math. There's a squeeze in the air that feels like a collective hand on a shoulder. You're 13 and experiencing the first time you understand that the act of saying a name can be sacred. You help your father down from Bess when the talk turns to hauling. Hinrich is there, leg-wrapped, but serviceable, arguing with a lanky Yankee over the merits of a particular axe head. He sees your father, and his face does that thing adults' faces do when they see a sick man looking less sick. "You will live to curse my stubbornness," he says cheerily. Your father grins. "I plan to outstubborn you to 80. Soup appears in cup somebody's generosity, somebody else's need. It is greasy and divine. You lick it like a crime. Your mother rolls peas in her palm and pretends not to count them. Supper and tomorrow's soup, she says. Unless I turn my back. By early afternoon, people begin to pack. There's a rumor of weather from the west that might be nothing and will definitely be long. You walk best toward home, your father riding like a tired saint. Halfway there, a woman's cry knives the air. Everyone in the vicinity turns hard right because terror has a built-in compass, a river and a child. You crest a small ridge and the world drops away into ice. A boy stands on the Delaware like a punctuation mark in a sentence about to end. The ice around him is a conversation among cracks. On shore, a mother stands ready to bargain with heaven, and heaven famously never haggles. Hinrich arrives rope first. He doesn't survey. He ties, hands one end to two men shaped like barns, and steps onto physics. The ice groans. The boy whimpers in a key that prepares the throat for a scream and never quite gets there. One step, Hinrich says. Only one. He says it with a voice that means two things. I am afraid. Move anyway. The boy moves. 12 inches that might as well be a life. Hands connect. The river, offended, takes Hinrich by the leg and tries to keep a souvenir. The rope hums. Men lean. Physics reconsiders. And the three of them slide belly first to shore. People become hands. Hands become blankets. Blankets become heat. You stand there sweating into your shirt in winter. You learn courage looks exactly like bad math done for someone else's child. On the walk back to the road, you hear murmurs. James, ice, Grove, thaw. And you think, maybe in this place love is measured by how much risky physics you'll attempt on a weekday. Home is the color of soup. Your mother adds peas to a pot and makes a sound like prayer disguised as arithmetic. Your father drinks tea like a man who wants to lie but is brave enough to admit he doesn't have another lie in him. Martha threads a needle and sews silence into sleeves. After the bowl is clean enough to reflect the fire, you press your forehead to the glassless window and look out at the shelter. Snow frets the roof, then slides, then lands like a sigh. Inside, two shapes stand and generate small suns. That's wealth where you live now. Warm cow and warm child and warm. Husband and a room with arguments about who should get the last ladleful of soup before bed. Your mother counts logs, then counts breaths, then counts peas. She writes this day in her mind. 2 candles equals peas, plus cornmeal, plus laughter. A boy saved equals the world, not absurd for one more afternoon. Your father says, next month. Proper shutters. Samuel says, glass. Everyone laughs because hope should be celebrated when it's stupid. You bank the fire. You bank your heart. You sleep like someone who has rope in his hands and intends to keep holding. Asterisk, some days are not about events. They're about maintenance. They look like nothing, another reason for everything. Today is one. The sun rises, unsure. The wind picks a tone and holds it for once, not a scream. You go through the liturgy. Coals gathered, ash raked, ember teased into a small animal. You place wood by size and species like arranging a choir. The fire catches easier now because you've learned its grammar. In a place where words can freeze, grammar matters. Your father's cough takes a half step back and sits down. Mustard plaster time. The smell is a broad-shouldered thing that opens the door uninvited and says, "I live here now." You smear it warm on a cloth and lay it to his chest. He hisses like a kettle and says thank you with eyes. "Yarrow?" your mother asks. He nods and swallows a cup that burns in two directions, down the throat and up the pride. He's decided to prefer breathing to complaining. Progress, asterisk. Martha, needle tucked like a weapon, sets up a command post by the window. She is mending a strategy, not pastime. Socks, sleeves, the bodice that gave up near the shoulder. You sit beside her and learn the stitch that locks without bulking. Your fingers are slower than your eyes. "Don't tug like you're mad," she says. "Invite it to lie down." She glances up, like you do with the fire. You hadn't thought of it like that. You think about everything like that now. Samuel is assigned to water. He comes back with a slush beard and a grin that makes him look half wolf. "It's softer," he says, of the cold, and he's not wrong. The bucket sloshes like a lake with manners. You set it near the hearth and put your hands around it, just for the novelty of holding something, not trying to be a weapon, your mother declares. A mending hour, a reading hour. Your father pulls out the old newspaper like a magician produces a dove that's mostly feathers. The ink is more memory than information, but when he reads aloud, you can feel the cabin sit taller. Trade prices, a ship, a petty parliamentary squabble, civilization's grocery list. Samuel falls asleep to politics. The rest of you decide to be civilized in a one-room house with a dirt floor by midday. The world does that slushy slide into afternoon. The shelter for Betty and May is holding like a good promise. You reinforce it anyway, because in winter you always audit your hope. A crossbrace here. A patch of snow tamped into mortar there. You listen to the boards talk to the wind. They're grumpy. They hold inside. Your mother makes onion syrup for the cough and warns about children drinking it like it's candy. You try to look insulted. She doesn't buy it. She takes a raw onion and a bit of honey sacrilege and mashes them until they become a potion that smells like duty. Your father's face makes an expression it didn't sign up for. You all pretend not to see in the quiet moments. The ones that used to feel like empty your mind runs forward to march. You imagine the river loosening. You imagine a hook in your hand and a line that goes tight and an argument at the end of the string. You imagine a skillet and a sizzle that means protein. Your body leans toward it like a plant. Afternoon is wood. You split, stack, think. Hinrich's leg will be a story soon, not a fact. Greta will teach your mother to fake sourdough with a starter that is more stubbornness than science. Martha will have a dress that doesn't double as an air vent. Samuel will catch a fish so small he'll pretend he meant to throw it back. Your father will sit on the stoop and call advice that you'll pretend to ignore while you do exactly as told. You make a pile of these visions and bank them like coals. Supper is peas in a broth you could read a newspaper through. It's good though, with a scrape of onion and a piece of bread the size of a thumb. Your father finishes his bowl and doesn't cough for a whole minute afterward. You all look at each other like children who decided not to jinx it this time. Night comes on with less hunger in it. You bank the fire the way you'd tuck a child. You mound the ash, tamp the edges, whisper a threat, behave or I wake you up mean. You set kindling and flint near enough to grab blind. You line boots like soldiers, toe to hill. You place the bucket where you won't kick it. Your mother runs a hand along the door bar like a blessing, and then a small miracle you barely recognize as one. You sleep through until first light, without waking to check if the other bodies in the room are still making the soft sounds of living. In the morning, the coals glow under the ash like a secret kept. You didn't move mountains. You moved breath. You moved stitches. You moved wood and water. You moved the line between hard and impossible by an inch. Some days, that's a continent. Asterisk, a sound wakes you you've been waiting to hear without knowing you were waiting. A groaning, a creaking, a series of wet cracks that make the hairs on your arms stand like they're listening. You step outside and the Delaware has changed species. Yesterday it was a field with an attitude. Today it's a mirror breaking itself on purpose. The ice has gone from a sheet to a herd. Big plates shoulder each other, tilt skyward, flash sun like knives, then roll. Between them is black water with a pinion. It moves with a seriousness that makes you reconsider everything you learned about patience. Don't go near, your mother says, before you have the chance to propose a bad idea. You don't. Even you are not that kind of 13. But you go to the bank with Hinrich and 2 other men, and you look like men do when they pretend they're judging a fight, and are actually learning to be humble. 3 days, says Mr. Peterson, who looks permanently disapproving and is right too often for comfort. Then lines. Hinrich shrugs. 2. They agree the way men agree, by disagreeing and then doing whatever the river says. The first day, the ice is violent. The second, it's merely vengeful. On the third day, the water widens between white flows. The men stand with hands on hips and say things like HM and maybe now. You return with a line coiled, a hook ground barbarously sharp, and bait that used to be bread and is now a concept, fishing. It turns out is about waiting in the cold and then acting very quickly. Waiting you already know. Acting quickly is a delight. Hinrich shows you how to read the water. See there, he says, where quick meets quiet. Fish is like person lazy, hungry. He sit where food comes, but he don't pay rent. You grin because truths translated through accents become wisdom. Your first strike feels like being chosen. The line tightens, and for a blink you imagine something the size of a legend. It is, in fact, a trout the size of your palm, furious that you invited it to dinner without asking. You land it clumsily, which is to say, successfully. The second is bigger, the third gets away, because that's how stories work. You bring home enough for a skillet to matter. Your mother flour dusts the fish with the thin patience of someone who can do magic when the pantry says no. The pan sizzles a song you could hum forever. Samuel dances for it. Martha pretends not to. Your father sits very still, as if being a man who eats fish he watched his son catch is a posture he's trying on. At the first bite, something breaks in your chest that isn't your heart. It might be despair refusing the rent. The flakes are soft, the salt is kindness disguised as a mineral, and you chew slow enough to turn this into liturgy. Your father closes his eyes because the best prayers come without words. The next morning you return with different bait, the last of the fat and more patience, the last of the nothing. You catch fewer fish because the river already knows your jokes. But the habit has begun. You go, you wait, you bring back small protein. You feel like someone who owns a future. There are rules to the thaw. Rule 1, everything becomes mud. The path to the well is a memory under brown. The yard tries to eat your shoes. Your mother gives up sweeping the dooryard and starts scraping it the way one scrapes a pot. Rule 2. Roofs leak where they intend to leak, and you put pots under. Rule 3. All the ice that used to be solid water rearranges itself into attitudicicles, grow knives, and pretend to be decorative. Snowbanks choose sudden collapse when you're not ready. The road slips out from under horses with a cruelty that looks like slapstick until you see a leg bend wrong dot in the middle of rules. There is a robin. Samuel sees it first, and his voice breaks into something between a laugh and a sob. The bird is tidy as a book. Its breast is a fresh wound. It hops, cocks its head, chooses a worm you can't see, and leaves with the speed of a rumor. There, your mother says softly, as if someone important has arrived and you should behave. That's it. Not spring, exactly, but the idea of spring. In the wild where ideas are often wrong, you mend fence posts that spent January pretending they were respectable. You sling rocks you forgot you owned. You walk your boundary and it changes underfoot and you accept it because the only other option is to yell at mud. Now that the worst danger for the river is stupidity, boys gather. Lines tangle, boots soak. Someone falls and everyone laughs and then helps and then laughs again. You are no longer afraid of every noise the water makes. You become afraid of none of them, which is a different problem. Your mother gives you a look that says, calculated idiocy or I skewer you. And you nod because you like your ribs where they are. Back home, May's hips say calf soon and Betty's eyes say still. Here, you pour a extra scoop of hay and consider names you won't suggest out loud because you're not supposed to. Believe in good futures too obviously at night. The wind loses ambition. The fire is smaller, the ash thinner, the air less metallic. You bank coals with a lighter hand and still wake to red. Your father coughs in the morning because he thinks that's his job. Then he goes to hours without remembering to cough and realizes he's out of work. Martha, who has been practicing in secret, puts a new dress on from pieces of old dresses and stands in the doorway to let the light make a decision. It decides in her favor. Well, your father says, pretending to judge the seam and not the world. We can take you to town or marry you off to a prince. Martha rolls her eyes to keep from spilling tears. You fall asleep with the smell of fish on your hands and do not wash it off because it smells like proof. And in your dream, you stand in the river and the water says, good, you remembered. The Lientu has learned endurance, but it has not learned humility. It stands there a little cocky now, like a small dog that chased off winter once and believes it can do it again. You and Hinrik decide to dignify its ego with bones. Beam, he says, tapping a plank like a doctor checking reflexes. Too tired. We put a rib here. He points and you see it. The angle that sagged when the wind pretended to be a man. The seam that let the north through when nobody was in the mood for metaphors. You fetch a length from the stash he insisted you take in January because he thinks ahead and expects you to catch up. Greta arrives with 3 sons and a basket of nails that look like they graduated top of their class. She sets the nails down as if they matter, and they do. Trade, she says. Your mother offers onions reduced to sweetness and knowledge of how long to boil a plaster. Greta nods, satisfied. Also, she adds, I brought yeast that is not yeast. It's a slurry in a jar, a pet that smells like ambition. Keep it warm. Feed it. Be nice to it. It is like a husband, she says, and then winks at your father, who pretends to mind. Neighbors arrive until it's a gathering without being a plan. Mr. Peterson brings a hammer and a face that says, "Don't make me like you," then proceeds to like everyone by hitting things where they belong. The Hendersons, suddenly barnless, show up with more hands than tools and work like people who owe a debt to the concept of roof. Kids orbit in chores, pass nails, hold boards, stand where told. Samuel invents a job called checking if the hammer is heavy and does it with gusto. By noon, the lean-to is a lean-to with intention. The new cross brace tightens its back. The roof sits with better posture. You chink with a paste that pretends to be masonry and does a decent impression. Someone packs snow around the base by habit and then laughs because the snow is losing the argument by the hour. Greta declares a pause and opens her basket like a stage curtain. Bread, cheese, a little sausage that deserves a trumpet. Your mother brings broth with a memory of fish and the onion that took so long to become sweet you want to applaud it. People sit on boards and stumps and the ground itself and eat like a meeting went well. Conversation ambles and then turns, as it always does, toward plans. Planting, Hinrich says, and people nod because the word sounds like removal of a curse. Peas this week, Mr. Peterson decides, because disapproval also applies to delays. The Hendersons will rebuild with 3 walls and a roof they can add to. Like yours, Mrs. Henderson says to you, smiling through last week's smoke. You blush the way a structure would blush if boards could. After food, someone finds a fiddle. Where did a fiddle come from? Was it there all winter? Was it birthed by Thor? No one asks. The musician tunes it to a key that sounds like green. A reel bangs out. Even Mr. Peterson's foot gives up and keeps time. Children fling themselves into choreography. Adults remember that bodies can be used for things other than labor. Martha dances with Greta, then with a Henderson girl, then, mortified and delighted, with you. Your father claps, then coughs, then stops because he can. There's talk of a communal plow team, 3 men, 2 animals, a season. Your father signs up ownership of his back and an IOU for his lungs. Hinrich offers the oxen that are not oxen so much as opinions with horns. Mr. Peterson sighs, like sharing resources might be the moral equivalent of dancing, and agrees anyway. By afternoon, May lies down in the lean-to with the kind of grunt that means her body is telling you secrets. Soon, Greta says, woman-eyed, "Make ready." Your mother begins to rally clean cloth and patience. Samuel decides names and then refuses to share them because he is at the age where power is spelled S-E-C-R-E-T. After the last nail, after the last slice, after the last tune, the neighbors peel away in 2s and 3s, taking their weather with them. The field returns to quiet, which is not silence so much as the sound plants make when they plan at evening. A drizzle begins that has nothing to do with harm. It's soft, like someone making tea. The roof ticks with it and holds. Inside the shelter, the cows chew and consider the day's architecture and decide to continue living. The thought makes your chest feel oddly large. Supper is bread that thinks it's bread, because Greta's jar did something marvelous in your mother's hands. The loaf is small and goes fast, but when you break it, steam rises like opinionated ghosts. You spread a smear of honey and look at each other like you are in a painting of a family doing well. Then you eat like people who remember last month's bowls, and will not pretend this one isn't a miracle after dark. Your father leans back against the wall, wraps a blanket around his shoulders, and announces in a voice that suggests he has rehearsed the speech. Tomorrow I will walk to the fence line and inspect our property like a landowner. Your mother says mm, in a tone that translates to, you can walk to the fence line and I will shadow you 2 steps behind. He grins because marriage is an old language he still speaks. The wind presses its face to the seams and finds fewer ways in. The house has begun to forget the shape of fear. The fire is a companion, not a stern parent. You sleep, and your dreams do not involve ice breaking under your feet or lungs drowning in the body that owns them. You dream about a calf standing for the first time, about peas pushing a green wrinkle through black soil, about a table with 2 dishes on it and nobody being surprised. Outside the rain whispers on. It is writing something in a hand you can't read yet. But you know the title. It's called Spring. Sunday arrives like a breath you forgot you were allowed to take. The sky is a bleached blue sheet, thin but honest. Your mother lines you all up like buttons, faces scrubbed with snow melt that smells like metal, hair tamed with the last whisper of lard. Your father insists on walking the whole way to miles that measure how far a set of lungs has traveled back toward belonging. The church is simply a house that volunteered. Weathered clapboards, a steeple that points not so much to heaven as to please let it not storm until afternoon. Inside, benches are a little crooked and a lot faithful. People collect. The way they fill the room is different than winter, less huddled, more arranged. You feel a hush land that isn't fear. It's recognition. We made it to this Sunday, and that's a sentence worth finishing. There is no preacher. There hasn't been for months. Mr. Peterson, who looks like he was born saying HM, stands at the front with a Bible that has known rain. He reads the Psalms in a voice that sounds like someone who splits wood for punctuation. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow. And people nod like they've walked it and can give directions. Prayers are not performance here. They are errands. One by one, voices stand up in the bodies that own them and go to work. For the Dawsons, someone says, and the room inhales the name James together, the way a team lifts. For the Henderson's barn, another adds, and you can almost see a beam rise. 4 calves coming, for seed not to rot in the ground, Greta says. Simple as a grocery list for God. Your mother's whisper is for your father's lungs and for the strength. To be kind on days when kindness feels expensive. You put in a word for May and for the robin to bring friends. After scripture and errand prayers comes singing. No one has the note until everyone does. A hymn rises ragged as a ploughed field and then, halfway through the second verse, turns golden. Even Mr. Peterson's mouth softens at the corners. You watch your father cradle the bass like a tool he remembers how to use. Samuel belts the melody with the arrogance of 9. Martha harmonizes without knowing the word. You stand in the place where your voice sits best and you add it. Small, but not apologizing. When the last chord fades, nobody hustles. The amen hangs and becomes conversation. Outside, the yard is mud and possibility. People break into knots. Trade plans, planting plans, barn-raising commitments. Someone passes you a biscuit so faintly sweet it could be imagined. You eat it like communion anyway. You drift to the Dawsons because grief needs. Witnesses who aren't gawkers. Mrs. Dawson's eyes are wells that don't ask for buckets. She says James's name with a calm that slays you. He liked the river best in summer, she says, to no one in particular. And the way the group adjusts tells you they will never speak of the river again without remembering that fact. Henrik slaps your father on the back gently, which is like watching a boulder try to be a feather. You look like man, he says. Your father pushes a grin through his moustache. I'm practicing, he answers. They discuss peas, as if peas are a moral question. Mr. Peterson insists on the 3rd week of March for planting, then adds, but God rarely respects my schedules, which is his closest attempt at humor in public since 1743. There's a posting nailed to the door. Teacher arriving in May. Figures and letters. Martha stares at it as if it is a window. I'm going, she says, in a voice that asks nobody's permission. Your mother nods immediate, warm. Your father says, I'll need a clerk to keep my farm ledgers honest, and you watch your sister stand 2 inches taller, the way a plant does when a cloud moves. A lanky boy suggests a foot race, and the yard turns into a chorus of shoes. Samuel runs like he's being chased by joy and would like to be. He finishes second and grins as if he won first. You clap him on the back and don't tell him the secret of life. That second place with laughter is worth 10 blue ribbons he'd cry over. On the way home, you detour to the river because water always writes the first draft of the season. Chunks of ice drift like stubborn ideas that refuse to accept they're over. The surface between them is knife black and purposeful. Your father stands, hands folded behind, and breathes slow. He doesn't cough. He doesn't brag. He just allows the moment to be what it is. Evidence. The path back runs through woods that are thinking green. You kick through leaves that died last year and are busy turning into next year's food. The sound is papery and holy. We'll chink the north wall this week, your father says, already choreographing ladders and buckets of clay. And proper shutters, Samuel adds, as if the word itself is a toy. And glass, he dares. You all pretend not to hear the extravagance, and also secretly agree to the dare. Home is warmer than it should be for one small fire. You think it might be the result of 20 people's heat still caught in your clothes. Your mother lays out a noon meal that is mostly the idea of a feast. Bread with a crust that suggests miracles. Onion soup with a glisten of fat on top like a stained glass window of mercy. A slice of cheese that gets divided into slices of slices because fairness is a skill. After you eat, you check the lean-to. May is restless in a way that's bookish-like. She's read the manual on carving and is rehearsing. Betty chews and minds her own rumination. You clear straw, prep clean cloth, arrange buckets. Your hands want to help before help is needed. Your head wants to memorize every step, even the ones you'll learn by messing up and fixing fast. Evening accumulates. The sun drops like a coin into a well, and you listen for the echo. Your father takes out the newspaper again, the one that is more talisman than information. He reads aloud bits you've heard before, and they feel new because the listener is new. A ship sailed. A minister quarreled with a council. Trade prices shifted the way river ice shifts. You absorb none of it and all of it. The tone, the cadence. The fact that a thin sheet of paper can tether a one-room house to a big idea called world. When the candles are nubs, and the fire is coals, and the wind has chosen not to whistle insults through your walls. Your mother says softly, "We are going to make it." She doesn't look around for agreement. She sets the sentence in the room like a brick, and the room incorporates it into the foundation. You lay down. The straw is still straw. The blanket is still thin, but the cold is just air now, not a plot. You sleep with your boots a little farther from your bed. Progress measured in inches, in fewer checks on your father's chest. In the quiet way your mother's shoulders finally drop. Tomorrow is Monday and mud, which is to say, the Sabbath will have to be carried into work. You decide to tuck a hymn under your tongue like a nail and keep it there while you build. Asterisk March begins to sweat. Not honestly, never that. The day starts with a skin of ice on the bucket and ends with rivulets soaring paths through whatever dared pretend to be solid. You discover new kinds of slip. The yard is a negotiation. The lane to the road is a treaty the mud violates during lunch. Rule 1 of mud season: you do not wear your best, because your best has been your only since December. Your mother issues a decree: there is no such thing as ruining pants in March. Everyone cheers like a law was repealed. You and your father shoulder the mattock and attack the trench behind the cabin. A small ditch to convince water to like somewhere else better. The first chop doesn't so much cut as persuade. The second finds a channel. By the 10th, the cabin exhales. Good, your father says, as if you asked his opinion. He straightens slowly and looks to the fence line with a hunger. Half afternoon, your mother calls from the doorway without looking up, because wives track the bravado clock in their heads. Chinking day arrives with a wagon of clay that used to be January and a pile of dried moss that used to be summer. You mix it with your hands because tools lie. The first smear is clumsy too wet. It slumps. The second holds. The third cracks. You learn as the wall learns. Martha stands on a ladder with the certainty of a general, smoothing seams with the edge of a board, whispering, "Stay," like she's housebreaking a dog. Samuel packs fistfuls into gaps with the zeal of a boy who once froze in January and would like to never meet that particular wolf again. Neighbors wander by as if the road told them something was happening. Mr. Peterson inspects your work and says, "It'll do," which, from him, is the same as my compliments. Greta offers ash to temper the clay. It keeps it from shrinking, she says. You stir it in and watch the paste change personality. Less sticky, more civilized. You thank her like she invented shutters. At noon, your mother unveils a pot of something that smells like a secret. Fish bones, onion ends, herbs that looked dead and were not. She ladles thin bowls that taste rich. Nobody asks how. Everyone says thank you twice. After, Greta produces a jar. The pet, she says, referring to the bubbling starter. It had a baby. She splits it into your crock and tells you to feed it. Flour and patience, she instructs. Like a man. Your mother raises an eyebrow that suggests the comparison flatters flour. Afternoons are for seed. Hinrich appears with a sack that feels like a scam. Dried little pebbles you bury on purpose. Peas first, he pronounces. They like cold. Like Germans. He scratches rows with a stick and you drop peas like prayers. Sam follows, patting dirt over each with a palm and a whisper. Martha labels beds with shingle scraps, peas, onions, beans, tomorrow. Your father writes the same in his head, ledger and double underlines, beans. You set snares by the far edge of the field, because rabbits read your seed labels too, and do not respect fences. Your father shows the loop not twice, then makes you teach Samuel because teaching is a test. He gets it, brags, then asks if he can name the snares. You allow it. He christens one General Washington because he's heard. the name and approves of its consonants. Mud season has a sense of humor that borders on mean. The cow yard, which was fine in February, is now a syrup that tries to eat hooves. You lay down brush, then planks, and watch May and Betty pick their way like ladies at a dance. May moves in a register that suggests opinions on your board placement. Betty approves by not falling. On Wednesday, the well goes cloudy snowmalt and silt gossiping together. You haul extra, set buckets to settle, and boil what you need. Your mother mutters about bellyaches in March. You remember one from 2 years ago that taught you the geography of pain. You boil more. The first thunder arrives like a rumor that grew legs. It's far off, a few sentences the sky practices without commitment. Samuel counts between flash and boom and miscounts on purpose to make it closer. The smell before rain is new. Earth waking, the ghost of last year's grass. Something metallic you decide is the memory of icicles. When the rain finally steps onto the stage, it is gentle, not January's assassin. You all stand in the door and watch shelter as theatre box. That night, sleep is heavy. The roof drums a rhythm that belongs on a table. You turn over and dream of beans climbing chords like church bells, of a path to the well that is dry and direct, of your father walking the fence without sitting down on the stump at the halfway place at dawn. The yard is deeper mud for having been rained on nicely. You slog to the lean-to and find May pawing the straw, nostrils flaring, eyes doing arithmetic. Ma, you call, and suddenly the cabin is full of midwives. Your mother, Greta, who arrived earlier than propriety because cows don't tell time. Even Martha with clean cloths stacked like blessings. Your father takes Samuel. Fishing because sometimes the most helpful thing a man can do is remove noise from a sentence. Asterisk carving is labor and theater and prayer. Time folds into itself. May lies, rises, lies again. The bag appears, slick and shining, and if you were a person who cried loudly, you would. Instead, you grunt quietly like the cow. Your mother's hands are sure. Greta's voice is a rope. Good girl. Good girl. There. And then the hooves. And then the head. And then the slither that is the sound of coming into a hard world with a good start. The calf breathes in this place for the first time, and the whole lean-to changes temperature. Samuel bursts back in time for the miracle and declares the name that has been sitting behind his teeth all week. Hope. No one argues. Even Mr. Peterson, who has wandered in on the scent of possibility, nods like he knew it all along. You rub the calf with cloth until it is less a creek rock and more a creature. May swings her head and licks with a devotion that insists. The calf makes the sound of figuring it out. It finds milk. You close your eyes because you cannot keep all this light in them at once. After, the day doesn't get easier. It gets regular again, chinking more seams, hauling more water, fishing a little and catching nothing because fish are not sentimental about your calf. But everything is different and the same. Your father sits in the doorway and watches the sky and doesn't cough for an entire page of the newspaper. Your mother makes bread from the pet jar that is now your jar, and when it rises, you stand around it like townsmen at a gallows, but this time you cheer. That evening, the thunder tries on a deeper suit and decides it will be dramatic next week. The wind leans against the new chinking and fails to find a friend in it. You bank the fire lightly and it behaves. You lie down with mud under your nails and a soreness that feels like a correct answer. Somewhere in the yard, the calf named Hope sleeps in a pile of straw, and you do too. And for once, the word means the same thing in two species. April doesn't ask for permission to change things. It arrives with a basket and a blade. It trims what winter over. It opens what was shut as a fist. It cuts loose the ropes that kept you tied to fear and says, walk. The creek unseams itself from bank to bank. Frogs advertise evening like barkers. Peepers set up a chorus in a key that even grief has to hum along with. Birds audition dawns. Robins play landlord on the lawn. A flash of blue, surprisingly electric, proves that color remembers you. Mud recedes reluctantly, like a guest who enjoyed the party too much. The lane firms from soup to stew to something that holds a footprint and returns it politely when you lift your foot. Your mother opens the door in the morning and forgets to shiver once before she remembers. Samuel starts leaving his boots farther from his bed, then, within a week, where they actually belong. Civilization marches on little feet. Fence mending comes due. Winter leaned on posts and asked them for opinions they were too tired to form. You straighten pickets, tamp earth, replace the rails that argued with ice and lost. Across the way, Mr. Peterson does the same and grunts approval in your direction without making a scene of it. He and your father share a tool twice without declaring war. This is what peace looks like. A borrowed auger and a returned auger on time. The woods give back their dead. The thaw is honest and rude. Branches, a fox your father saw limping last January, now stilled and teaching the crows. A shape by the low ridge that everyone passes quietly because it might be a deer and it might not. You help when you should, look away when you must, and learn a hard country's rule. Not every story requires you as a character. The river is navigable for ideas again. Traders who gambled Philadelphia before the ice came now gamble it again for spring. Talk at the crossroads picks up pace you recognize from last fall. Prices, rumors, a recipe for a poultice that fixes everything from sprains to bad decisions. A man tries to sell you a saw with missing teeth. You examine it like you are honoring an elder, then pass. Because you are polite and not stupid. Martha takes her patchwork dress and improves it until it is less patchwork and more statement. She announces, over stew, when the teacher comes, I'll sit front. Your father salutes with a spoon. Your mother contributes a bar of soap to the cause. You offer to teach her long division the way Hinrich taught you to split wood by doing it wrong. And then, right until the right sticks, Greta shows up with something thin and golden in a jar. Chicken fat. A spoon in soup, she instructs, and your children remember how to smile without needing to try. Your mother gives her onion pickles in return. We didn't die of scurvy, she says lightly. Greta laughs. Not yet. The calf earns her name daily. She skitters in the yard like a miscast dancer, legs too long for the scene, joy too big for the costume. May follows like a chaperone with a soft mouth. Betty, unimpressed, maintains her status as the family's stern aunt. Milk is a daily now, not a holiday. Your mother skims cream like a thief with permission. Samuel watches, rapt, a small politician learning the flows of power. Planting expands. Beans they feel like hope engineered. Corn your father demonstrates spacing with steps that look like a dance and are a map. Squash grater insists on mounds like small graves for hunger. You lay seeds in soil and cover them with an instinct that comes from watching your mother tuck Samuel in winter. The gesture is the same. Sleep, grow, surprise us. On a Tuesday that looks like a Sunday, you help raise the Hendersons' three-walled barn. the prototype stolen from your own lean-to. Hands, rope, the physics of cooperation. When the last brace settles and the wind runs a palm across it and shrugs. The Hendersons cry in gratitude, loud and messy, and nobody looks away. Someone shouts, "Speech," and Mr. Henderson, who is a quiet man unless beer is present, says simply, "We can stay," and that is a poem. The teacher arrives on a mare with more miles in her than shine. Miss Whitcomb is younger than your mother and older than your fear of letters. She climbs down in a skirt that clearly doesn't trust this mud, smiles like she knows 30 names already, and shakes your father's hand like he's a trustee in a bank that deals in human futures. Figures, letters, and penmanship, she announces as if she were listing virtues. Martha Nilly, Levites. Your father reads aloud less often now because evenings are for mending tools, planning furrows, soaking seed. But when he does, the paper is a month older and the news is stale, and it doesn't matter. The act is the candle. The words are the wick. Light is light. April's knife is not all gentle. A late frost throws one last punch, like a drunk pulled from a tavern. You wake to a white film on the cabbage bed, and the peas looking like they were surprised in their sleep. You and your mother build little bonfires of damp straw at the ends of rows, and the smoke drifts low and obstinate, covering what it can, forgiving what it can't. In the morning, you walk the beds as if visiting the sick. Some leaves are black-kissed, some shrug, most live. You learn relief's particular limp. On the Sunday after frost, church sings louder. The hymn picks up a defiance note. Mr. Peterson's disapproval looks almost like gratitude. He preaches a sermon titled, "The Righteous Are Like Trees," and you imagine yourself not as a boy holding an axe, but as a sapling with a future that gets measured in rings. Home that afternoon, your father stands and says, "Shutters." The word buzzes in the air. You mark boards, saw straight as you can, plain edges until they decide to fit. Hinges are precious bartered, so you set them carefully, like earrings on a face you love. When the first shutter swings and thunks and stays, Samuel claps so hard his hands might swap skin. You swing it open. The breeze breathes through a frame that is yours. You fall asleep with the shutter cracked, and the night enters in a way that is invitation, not invasion. Frogs sing. A fox barks and is not hungry for you. Wind touches your hair like a parent grazing your temple with fingertips in a corridor. You do not startle. You do not rehearse the path to flint and steel in your head. You sleep because you can dot. April cuts, but it also ties. It stitches your house to your land with new seams. It severs the memory of a fear's sharpest edges. It opens you up and puts something warm inside. The belief that spring is not a rumor this time, that summer is not a myth, that harvest is a word you will say out loud without glancing at the door. May walks in carrying baskets. She sets one down by the door like thinner blankets folded away, heavy responsibilities you welcome. She moves the line between enduring and living 3 feet forward, and tells you to catch up. The cabin gets taller, not because it grows, but because you stop ducking. Light comes through the oiled paper and the glass panes you do not have, and you don't resent the difference. The shutter opens like a hello. You smell yeast on the table before you see the loaf, because you are now the kind of family that expects bread, not extra. The baseline has moved. Your father recites chores like blessings. Fence, field, roof, pitch next year a hair steeper. He runs a hand along the north wall and grunts admiringly at your chinking. which is as close to proud as that sound can be. He puts a hand to his chest once in the morning, out of habit, and then notices he hasn't coughed. He smiles at his body with truce. Your mother inventories the root cellar. Almost nothing. Which is not a tragedy, because almost nothing in May is an opening, not a sentence. She lays out seed for the second sowing, feeds the pet jar, pinches Samuel's cheek when he tries to steal the pinch. She hangs wash and it dries in a day instead of a philosophy. She hums again, and the tune doesn't contain winter at all. Martha walks to school with a slate under her arm and the kind of posture that tells the road it can be muddy if it wants. She's willing to be taller anyway. Miss Whitcomb's first lesson is letters and their habits. Martha's handwriting grows bolder line by line, as if pen strokes could be ribs. She brings home sums and corrects your father for fun, and he pretends outrage and offers to wrestle, which he no longer wheezes through. Samuel collects miracles for sport. 2 robins, he reports, 3 frogs, and a fish that got away because I let it. He is brown at the edges from sun and careless in a way that was impossible in February. He names every tool twice, its real name and its secret name. The mattock is George. The plane is Barrel. He names Hope's favorite patch of yard the theater, because watching a calf learn legs is worth a ticket. Sunday dinners evolve from hot water with ambition to soup. Sometimes there is a second thing. The day you have bread and a stew and a dish of greens that tastes like pennies in the best way. You all sit back at the same time and look at each other sheepish, like you broke a rule by being full. Your mother says, "We'll save the grease." And everyone laughs because you would, even if you were kings. The settlement center is busy with doing instead of enduring. A boy you raced in mud season sells bundles of kindling and spends the money on a storybook missing its cover. The Hendersons' barn smells of fresh sawdust, which is the scent of apology accepted. The Dawsons stand together and say James's name in sentences that end with verbs like planted and sang. And you hear the change memory, no longer a blade against their throats, but a handle they can hold. Asterisk. You and Hinrich true up the lean-to into an honest outbuilding. Next year, we make barn, he promises, eyes on your field as if it were a ledger with black ink returning. This year, we practice. Practicing has become a sacrament, the sacred repetition that turns panic into muscle memory. You practice building, mending, planting, patience. You practice gratitude until it shows up even when not called by name. On a Thursday that feels like music. Boats begin brushing the far bank, and everything smells like tar and rope. Someone trades a pane of glass for labor owed, and suddenly the Fletcher's front window is a mirror of sky. The day you see your face in it, briefly. You think of the boy in January, and you do not recognize him until you look at the eyes and see the same stubborn there. Refined by weather, Miss Whitcomb holds a recitation under the oak by the church. Children stand on a stump and recite lines they've been given. Samuel forgets and improvises a poem about the calf named Hope that scans terribly and rhymes suddenly, and makes 50 people laugh without pity. Martha copies out a passage from Psalms in a hand so steady Miss Whitcomb shows it around and says, "This is what letters look like when they know who they belong to." Your father claps like he is knocking dust out of a rug. Your mother dabs her eye and blames the sun. On the walk home, you do the accounting that matters. Winter took things. It always does. Some you knew about. Some you didn't have names for until they were gone. But look what came back, dressed as spring. Neighbors who are not acquaintances anymore. A shelter that started as an emergency and became a plan. A father who sits on the step in the evening and tells a story without coughing between every sentence. A sister who will read ledgers and not get cheated. A brother who thinks naming everything is how you keep it. At the door, your mother pauses and looks out over the field. The peas are up, neat green stitches. The beans gossip under dirt. Corn has not yet broken, but your father sees it anyway, and the seeing makes him younger by a year. We will have to work harder than we want, he says. We will be tired in ways that feel good. We will argue about whether to weed in the cool or weed at once. We will eat what we grow and share what we can't eat, your mother adds. Eyes on the Hendersons' new roof, on the Fletcher's glass, on Mr. Peterson's new fence post that stands perfectly plumb because he would die if it didn't. And share what we can't eat, your father repeats. Because echoing a good sentence is good work. The calf bolts and skids and then finds the exact middle of her legs the moment animal life looks like a solved equation. Samuel whoops. Hope answers with a kick that is half delight, half physics. You laugh with your whole face. Your mother's hand slips into your father's, and they don't look at each other because looking would make it an event. And it's better than that. Its normal evening comes like velvet without teeth. You open the shutter and leave it that way. The house breathes. You bank the fire so lightly it's mostly a hug. You put the flint away in the drawer because you are not afraid of waking without a spark. You lay down. The straw is still straw, but softer for being warmed by day and not just panicked by night. You fall asleep to frogs and your father's ordinary snore and the small, hopeful sound of beans doing math in the dark. And if someone listening to this in a warm bed tonight thinks, for a moment, about the furnace that clicks on like a conjurer, the glass that keeps wind where it belongs, the refrigerator that hums abundancive, they think of William for one breath and whisper thank you into the quilt. Not to anyone in particular, but to the idea of getting to live easy sometimes than the story has done what stories are for. You wake before sun, not out of fear, but out of habit and hunger for the day. You step to the door and open it to air that tastes faintly of cut grass and bread. The field is a sheet someone has begun to embroider. The river shoves light along like it's late for a meeting. Birds negotiate the terms of dawn. What's first? Your father asks behind you, voice smooth. Water, you say, smiling, because the answer is always water. Then everything else. And you go, because the day after survival isn't rest. It's life. And you, William the boy who woke to a bitten dark January and learned the grammar of Flamar, very good at living. Asterisk.